All right, welcome back, Powers on Sports Podcast. What is that time of the year in Major League Baseball? Wheeling and dealing for these GMs. The fans are screaming, "Who should we get? Go get somebody. Dump salary if you're losing." So we're going to talk about all things MLB trade deadline. We're going to get some of the inside baseball of what it maybe it's like to be traded or be speculation of being traded as a player. We're going to our baseball analyst Chris Perez, two-time All-Star closer with the Cleveland Indians. He's been with us all year long, and he is our guy here as we get to the trade deadline. I do have to preface this. We're recording this on Tuesday night, so things probably will have happened by the time you listen to this podcast, but we're going to give you a lot of speculation, give you our thoughts on what teams should and shouldn't do. Welcome in, Chris Perez.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Exciting time of year. The races have shaped up, and now teams can sit back and kind of see where they are for the year.
Yeah. All right, before we get to the trade chatter, I want to get to all the last few days and week or so, all the speculation about football contracts and running backs and free agency. Talk about free agency in baseball. For those that don't know, 6 years is the number, right? Before you become an unrestricted free agent.
Yeah, 6 full years. Yep.
So as a player, you hear all this chat about running backs getting used up before they can be free agents. What is the thought amongst the players? Is 6 years? I mean, that's a long time. Most guys don't make it to the majors till they're probably 21, 22 at the earliest. What's the thought of the players? And again, you were a part of one of the most powerful players associations in all the sports. Why has the Players Association never kind of gotten that number a little bit lower than 6 years?
Well, I mean, if you look back, back in the days of Babe Ruth and stuff, they were paid whatever the owners wanted. So to get it to where we are today, where we got the arbitration system in place, that was a big win. It's just hard. Every time you want to get something, you have to give up something, and the owners have been trying to get salary caps in the sport since the early '90s. 6 years is a long time. I mean, the average major league career, I think it's like a little over 3 years.
Right.
So it is a long time. Fortunately, nowadays, I mean, if you're doing well, arbitration kind of takes care of you. Me personally, yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of things that could be changed in the game. I'm more for a world draft. I don't understand why, a 16-year-old Dominican kid can start his career, but a 16-year-old, U.S. citizen can't. But yeah, I mean, that is the holy grail, is to get that free agency. And the closer you get, especially you look at somebody like Juan Soto, the closer you get to that 6th year, I mean, it's even more of a, draw to go to at least test the waters. I mean, you put in all that time, you have no real rights. You can go to arbitration, but it's still within a system. So to get close to that 6 years and actually have a say in where you want to go, and it's tempting. Other players, you look at the Rays, they signed up. Wander Franco signed a huge deal, right, a couple months into his major league career. That's a little more prevalent in today's game. Especially when
you see the Braves doing a lot of that big time.
And it's smart, but I think every situation is unique, and the Braves have drafted some of those players. I know the Rays drafted Wander, so you get to know him a little bit better. Other organizations don't want to do that. The Cardinals got a bunch of younger guys that they haven't really locked up. They kind of want to make you prove it to you make it kind of a deal. But yeah,
to do that back in before you were there. Cleveland did that big time with Baerga and Kenny Lofton and Manny Ramirez and all those guys when they were really good in the late '90s, early 2000s. As a great example, right. Smaller market teams tend to extend the guys sooner than maybe some of the bigger market teams. Correct?
They have to do that gamble. You can't, if you think Wander Franco is going to turn out to be he was the number one prospect in baseball when he came up. If you think he's going to be a top 10 player in the league, you're going to have to pay him in arbitration. If let's say he wins an MVP one of those years, now you're looking at a 12, 13, $15 million a year salary. Yeah, you can weigh it out. It also goes a long ways to show the player that you are behind them, and takes that pressure off of him maybe. And that's why I say it usually only happens to guys where the organization knows them. Some guys, it is a risk, giving them 8 years guaranteed. I mean, we see it every day around the league. I mean, the Yankees have a long list of guys that they've paid just to not play. Right. And smaller market teams can't do that. So it is more of a risk for them. And you don't see the Yankees doing that. Most of the big market teams, they don't do that. I mean, they don't lock up there. Aaron Judge tested free agency last year, and he's been a Yankee his whole career. He ended up going back to the Yankees, but still, I mean, the bigger market teams, the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Cubs, they don't really play with that game because they can afford,
overpay.
Exactly. They can afford to go through the arbitration process if they're getting that kind of productivity from the player.
Yeah, and that's going to lead us into our conversation here as free agent because, again, the guys like Ohtani, you got Soto, who's got 1 year left on his deal. Does that make him more tradable this year as opposed to next year? And, a lot of this stuff is – a lot of these guys that are going to be are getting traded this coming up week and weekend are in the last year of their deals. They're going to be free agents. So that plays a lot into why these teams are going to trade these guys because you want to get something for them and all that stuff. So before we get to that stuff, talk about the excitement or the nervousness of the trade deadline in a clubhouse. If you're on a good team, your anticipation is, okay, is the management going to go get somebody for us? Are they going to get another bat, another pitcher? Are they going to get somebody that might replace me in my role? Talk about just that dynamic of being on a good team in a clubhouse at the trade deadline versus a bad team where you might be the guy who's getting traded to somebody because other people have interest in you.
I think it's exciting both ways. I got traded, kind of early. I think I was traded second to last week in June. Yep. So I was traded kind of early. But I mean, if you're on the good team or a team that's right there, depending on how your division is, like if you look at the AL Central this year, I mean, it's not the best division, but it's still good to make the playoffs. And once you make the playoffs, anything can happen. So you're on a team like that.
Minnesota's
another team, right? They have enough pitching to maybe make a dent in the playoffs. So if they make a trade for a hitter, it can put them over the top. And as a player that's established on the team, that's what you want is a chance. Other teams where you're kind of out of it and you're kind of like the Oakland A's, you're kind of your other leagues, shopping list, they go through your team. It's exciting to get an opportunity to get out of that situation,
Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Colorado, Pittsburgh, Kansas City.
Right. Like the guy for Oakland just got traded to Baltimore, the Fujikami guy. Yeah, he just gained like 50 games in the standings, like that can only make you more excited to come to the ballpark every day and do your job. So if you're on one of those teams and you may be, I mean, we're all human. We see it online. We see the rumors or, your contract situation. Like Oakland has Ramon Laureano, he doesn't seem like a guy that could be traded, but he may be a fourth outfielder for the Braves or something to make their, lineup better in the playoffs. A guy like that, he's been a veteran. He's been around. It changes his, it can't do anything but make you excited. On the flip side, if you're on a team and you don't make that trade, I think I remember in 2011, maybe in Cleveland, we were like right around 500. Nobody was running away with the division and we needed some hitting. And we really basically traded for like AAA guys. And, it kind of tells the team like, all right, well, this is what we got, hopefully we get hot, but we didn't get any support from the front office. And those decisions have to be made all along the league.
And especially in a position that you played, relief pitching, those are the things that, you hear all these rumors about a setup guy, maybe a middle reliever, maybe a closer. There's a couple of haters, a free agent to be. You got a couple guys on some small market teams that have done well. A guy like David Robertson that's been around a long time and been a playoff contender. What about the thought of getting guys with playoff experience, how important that is, a guy like Hader, a guy like Robertson that have played as opposed to a guy who's having a good year on a bad team, but maybe he's never been in a playoff race, a pennant race.
That's somebody like Baltimore. They got the two guys at the back end of their bullpen. One's a rookie, Cairo, and the other one, Bautista, is not a rookie, but he's having by far the best year of his career. So do you trust those guys in a one-run game in the playoffs? I mean, you have to based on what they've done, but it's always nice to have that, like you said, veteran that's been there before in the World Series, like a Robertson or somebody else that's a big-time reliever. And you'll see these Frankenstein bullpens get put together here in the next 4, 5, 6 weeks, all with the goal of getting all meshed out by the time October rolls around. And if let's say you're the Braves or the Rays or the Orioles, you're sitting in the playoffs right now looking like, how do we get better 1 through 25 or 26 now? It might be that lefty reliever that you bring in the fourth inning of Game 5 that gets you over that hump. And you look back in 2020 or 2021 when the Braves won the World Series, they replaced their whole outfield at the trade deadline, right. And they caught fire and it worked out. there's plenty of other instances where it doesn't work out, like the Padres last year getting Soto and Hader, and you're like, all right, here we go, we got the stars, and it just didn't work out. But that's the risk, as a fan and as a player, that's the kind of front office I want. I want them to go for it, trade away all of our farm team to get Soto for a year and a half and see what we got. As a fan, it's exciting. It's an invest. The owners are giving an investment into the team, and sometimes it works out, and you look like a genius, and so, like Anthopoulos in Atlanta, and other times you're just like, well, it's baseball. It didn't work out.
Especially for these small market teams. When you got a chance in these small market teams and you're in the playoff hunt, you got to go for it. I'm not saying you got to sell your soul, but you got to make a move to go get a big player to fill a need.
I don't know how you can look at the fan base in the face and say buy some more tickets when if you don't. Every situation is different. Like Oakland's not going to go for it this year. Obviously,
Cincinnati, you're Baltimore,
right.
you're Minnesota.
Oh, for sure. Cincinnati, Baltimore. That you see the fans showing up, but it's winning baseball, especially in those type of cities. I know Cincinnati's had the football side of it for the last couple of years, but Baltimore and that type of a city, it's contagious. And you see Orioles hats and jerseys when you go to the grocery store or go to school, and it's exciting. And baseball is like an everyday soap opera. So when you're going well, it just draws interest, and the owners benefit from that. So it's nice to see when they reciprocate the investment.
All right, so we're going to get to some players here in just a second. Just a couple minutes here. You're listening to Powers on Sports Podcast. We're with Chris Perez, two-time closer, Cleveland Indian All-Star. We're talking trade deadline stuff. Let's talk about the logistics of being traded. You said you were traded.
Yeah.
Talk about, and I don't know if you were married at the time or not. Talk about if you're a single guy getting traded from whatever town to the next town. Go take the audience and the fan through just that process of they tell you you're traded on a Tuesday night. What happens next?
Yeah, I got traded we had a Saturday day game, and I was actually out to dinner with some family, and I was married. My wife, after the game, it was like 8:00. We're at an Italian restaurant, and I get the call from the GM, and he's like, "Chris, you've been traded." My first question was like, "Where?" and then he told me Cleveland, and I'm like, "Okay, what do I do?" He's like, "Well, just come to the field to get your stuff. We have a flight for you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. You'll be in Cleveland, and good luck." That's basically it. I didn't see. I didn't see anybody else of the front office or the staff or anything. I went to the field. I got my bag my whole locker was already packed in a bag. Picked it up. Jeez. Got to the airport the next morning. Get into Cleveland. They had a car ready to take me straight to the field, and that's how it happens. It's a business. And
what do you do? Basic living things like who the hell? I mean, obviously you were married, so you probably had little help. Who packs up your apartment in Cleveland? Who gets clothes together for you? And just if you have a dog, how do you get the dog to wherever he's got to, how do those just day-to-day living things, how does that work?
So the traveling secretaries for the teams would play a big role in that. And when you get traded to a new team, obviously they usually put you up in a hotel for a week or so, just to, depending on the schedule and everything, you could be home for a day and then on the road again for 9 days. So baseball, you learn to live, you can get released any day. You can get traded any day. You can get moved up any day when you're in the minors. So you kind of live out of your suitcase. And, until you're established, luckily it was only my second year in the league. So it wasn't like I was, bringing my furniture in for the season. I was still trying to establish my career. And the year before I got sent up and down like 2 or 3 times. So you just pack a couple suitcases. That's it. So it really wasn't that difficult for me. For my wife, and like you said, the dog and everything, she has to, we had a nice apartment in downtown St. Louis, and then I get traded to Cleveland, and now we're living, in a hotel for a week or two, and then we moved to like executive housing out in the suburbs for the rest of the season, and it's just kind of like survival.
Is that something where in the last couple of months you're just going to live in a hotel, or do they find an apartment? Does the next team help you find a place, or is that up to you?
They give you some leads, but it's up to you. The other team that traded you, now you're still on the hook for that, that housing that you had in St. Louis that I had.
Break the apartment lease. You got to break the apartment lease, basically.
Well, they try to find somebody else to move in there, and if they can't do that, then they pay for it the rest of the season. Okay. So, the team does take care of this is all written. Our unions fought for these rights. I don't know what exact years, but this is all. When they say they're collective bargaining, it's these little things like this that people don't really think affect our work, but it does. I mean, we're only human, one night I'm in St. Louis and the next day I'm supposed to be in Cleveland and I have a wife and dogs and, where are we going to live? Like a whole new city, all this stuff. So You know, they do try to make it as easy as possible. But I've had teammates that have lived in a hotel the whole season. They just they check out. They check out when we go on the road, and when we come back, they're right back in the hotel. You know, guys that have been released 6 or 7 times, or you know, they're just used to not having roots and living out of the suitcase and sometimes doing laundry at the field.
So when you get to that new team in Cleveland, who's your man? Was Francona the manager at the time?
No, it's actually Eric Wedge was still there.
So does Wedge bring you in front of the whole clubhouse and say, "Hey man, this is Chris Perez, your new guy," or is it you just walk in the clubhouse, find your locker, and start shaking hands?
Pretty much, you just walk in the clubhouse. Well, first you go see the manager, you know, introduce yourself and have, you know, I'm Chris Perez. And it was actually a kind of a weird situation because that year it was 2009, and Cleveland had kind of was that small market team that went for it. They signed Kerry Wood as their closer. They had Cliff Lee, and they had traded CC Sabathia the year before, but they still had Cliff Lee, and they had some you know, some good hitters still. And they just had a bad year, and they were sellers, so they sold. And I was one of the first pieces that came over as a, you know, as a young guy to be part of the new team. So all the veterans, they were wondering where they were getting traded. And a couple weeks later, Victor Martinez gets traded, and then Carl Pavano gets traded, and Rafael Betancourt, who is at the end of the bullpen, he gets traded. And so it was kind of a weird situation. They're like, oh shit, you know, it's a changing of the guard. You know, like, the first piece got moved, and I'm next. So it was definitely a weird situation, and it's just part of the professional experience. You know, Eric Wedge was trying to manage his ass off because he knew his job was on the line, and he actually ended up getting fired at the end of the year. So it's nothing like it. And then you know, you get a pair of cleats, and you're like, all right, here you go. You know, go in the bullpen, meet some new guys, and you might go in tonight. I don't know. And you know, it's thrown to a catcher that you've never thrown to, and it's just a kind of a whirlwind. But that's what the minor leagues are for. Minor leagues get you ready for that kind of stuff. You know, I remember getting moved up from AA to AAA and walking into a whole new clubhouse. That was a weird situation too. A bunch of salty vets that were getting called up and didn't want the young guys there. And you know, you just gotta do your job. At the end of the day, you're a professional baseball player. Your job is, as a pitcher, my job is to get outs. You know, it's.
And then one more thought on that trade process. If, you know, let's say you're the guy who's an established, whatever your role is with the team, and a new guy comes in, does the manager tell you, hey, Chris, we're going to have this guy be the setup guy, now you're moving to the 7th inning? Or, hey, Chris, he's going to be the closer and you're going to be the setup guy? Do those conversations happen?
I wish they did. Sometimes, I mean, every manager is different. You know, Francona definitely was a lot more. He didn't really care about your feelings. Like, he's telling you this is the best for the team. You know, this is what we're going to do. Other managers, you know, the actions speak louder than the words. So when that, you know, when it's the 8th inning and it's a 1-run game, and that phone rings and a certain guy gets up, well, that's a statement said right there, right? He's the setup guy. Or, you know, if it's the 9th inning and it's a 1-run game and you're the one warming up, well, you're the closer. Like, that's. So the actions definitely speak louder than words. When I was with LA, we actually started the year. We had like 3 or 4 closers in the bullpen. It was me, Brian Wilson, Kenley Jansen, and Brandon League. So we had 4 all-star guys that had been closers, all-stars in the bullpen. Wow. And we didn't have any of those discussions early on in the year. We just kind of, obviously Kenley was the closer from the year past, so he started in that role. And actually, you know, your performance dictates where you pitch.
But especially near the trade deadline, when guys are coming and going, does the manager tell you, hey, Chris, we're going to, you know, we just acquired Kenley Jansen, and he's going to be the closer. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully those kind of conversations do happen instead of just, you know, showing up to the field and you know, not having your name called in the 9th, if that's what you are. Like if Baltimore went out and got Craig Kimbrell or something, you know, I would hope they would call in the 2 guys that have been carrying them all year in the bullpen and be like, listen, this guy's just here to help us out. Your role hasn't changed, or whatever it is, just so you're on the same page. You know, at the end of the day, the goal should be to win a championship. And, you know, if you look at Bautista, he's in line for a big payday now, you know, the kind of season he's having. So, you know, it can get kind of, you know, that's where the character comes in. You know, if you have a good team of guys that are all pulling in the same direction, trying to get that championship, it shouldn't matter.
No, you're right. All right, let's get to some teams and some players and what some teams should do and shouldn't do and on. I'm gonna rattle off a list of players, and then we'll go through some teams and tell me what you think. All right, obviously the biggest fish out there, if he's out there at all, we don't know, is Ohtani. You know, they've not said yay or nay. They're probably going to wait till the absolute end of the week to see where they're at in the playoff race and all that stuff. You got Juan Soto, who we kind of mentioned, 1 year left on his deal. The Padres, massive underachievers, probably out of it. Do they trade them to try to recoup what they had to pay to get them? Bellinger, Cody Bellinger, Dodger. He's with the Cubs now. You got a team like St. Louis who's struggling. Flaherty, potentially Arenado, maybe Paul Goldschmidt, those kind of guys. Robertson and Hader, kind of your two big closers that might be out there. Stroman, who's a good 3 or 4 pitcher. He's not a 1 or a 2, probably a 3. And then you got a guy like Bednar from Pittsburgh, unknown guy, but he's had a really good year as a closer. So let's talk about which of those names are guys that you really think could make an impact?
Just off the top, guys I think might get are probably going to get traded. Cody Bellinger's on the top of the list probably.
Yeah.
He can play first base. He can play center field. He's a lefty bat with pop. He's hitting well right now. He can steal bags. He can do a lot for a lot of teams. Yeah. You plug him in on maybe like an Arizona or something, and that lineup really gets lengthened out. Right. Ohtani's obviously the big prize. I just don't see any kind of deal getting done, honestly. I mean, there's only a certain number of teams that actually have the prospects who the Angels would want. And then, if you're a major league team trading for him, like, you're not going to give up your number 1 or 2 starter in the big leagues for him. Like, that just hurts your team. I mean,
right.
If
you're Tampa, I know we're both here in the Bay Area. You need a jolt to this clubhouse. You're on a major slide. You've never gone for broke before. If you're Stu Sternberg, you've never really gone for it. Do you sacrifice? I'm not saying the number 1 or 2 prospect, but do you give up 3 out of the top 6 or 7 guys and a major league player that can start for them to go get them for 2 months and go for it?
I mean, it's very tempting. My only problem is if they had their full team, if they still had Boz and they still had Rasmussen and they still had Springs, I would say go for it. I mean, this little stretch since before the All-Star break to now, they have more holes than just what Ohtani will fill. Don't get me wrong, it would send a huge statement to the rest of the league
and the community.
And they have the pieces to do it. Actually, I think they're minor league. You throw in like a Taj Bradley as a top major league starting pitcher, and then they have the prospects in the minors, Curtis Mead and some other guys down there, and they probably would take a Ronda, who's been tearing up the minors, and then they might even need somebody like a Jose Siri too,
right?
So that's 2 big leaguers that are, Taj Bradley's young, but he's got great stuff. His future's bright, and then Siri's leading the team in homers. I think he's controlled for a couple more years too, and then all the prospects. I mean, you plug Ohtani into that lineup, and that pitching staff, and
here's what he could do. I think from your perspective. Couldn't he be your closer in September and October?
See that now I've had this debate with my friends because there's no way, like, he's already doing incredible stuff. There's no way he can do that for another 5, 6, 7 years. It just the toll on your body is just too much. So I think, yes, that's his future, is to be like an ultra bridge guy or, the bulk guy after a starter. And then when the playoffs get here, then maybe you start him, 4 or 5 innings. But like, I think he would be the perfect guy for that scenario. And then his stuff would play up too. He'd be throwing 101 probably
for
with that nasty slider.
You get him for 20 pitches,
maybe 2 innings. In the playoffs, if a bridge guy. Yep. I love it. And then who's to say if you do that, then you can play him in the field too. You don't just have to DH him. You can play him in center field and let his real athleticism take off.
First base. Put him at first base.
There's a lot of options he brings to the table. Now, other teams that could go for him, I saw yesterday maybe that there was 2 teams that have, kicked the tires on him or whatever, like Baltimore might have been on there. I just don't – I mean, whatever team is trading for him, I just don't – how you can't sign him back, right? You're going to lose him. So it's really a 2-year rental. And then, if you're the Angels and you don't trade him, then you get nothing for him, or are you going to sign him back? Like – you had him and Trout and Pujols before that and Rendon, and you can't make the playoffs. Like you can make the playoffs without Ohtani too. So you need to get something for him, either a long-term deal done. Maybe they shock everybody and lock him up to a 10-year deal at the All-Star break. I don't know, but it's definitely very interesting. And if you're the Braves, I have a couple friends that are big Braves fans. They got some talented players under control.
Oh yeah.
You put him in that lineup with Acuna and Olsen and Murphy, and they have big money now. The Braves are owned by they're
Liberty Media, big
exactly
media company.
Big media company. They're a publicly traded company. Like they have some revenues to tap. That new stadium draws so many fans now.
Right.
I throw them as my wild card.
Okay.
And now other guys, the Bender guy for Pittsburgh, he might make the biggest impact in the playoffs. Some guy that could come in and like I remember the Red Sox got Koji Uehara for that year. He was unhittable. He was just unhittable. So the relievers that nobody knows about, baseball guys know about him, and front offices know about him. And the Pirates are probably going to get a couple good players for him.
I think Stroman could be a guy maybe Cincinnati goes and gets. They need a starter. A guy like he could be your number 2, maybe 2 or 3 starter for Cincinnati, maybe even Baltimore.
I think he's your ace. I think if Cincinnati trades for Stroman, and they got some guys on the block. India, I heard, is on the block, but I don't know if Toronto. I don't know who wants him, but if the Cubs would want him, but maybe it could be a 3-way deal. I don't know. But you put Stroman on the Reds, I think he's your ace. Abbott's a rookie. Green's a young guy, but he that's what they need, is that guy with the presence that that's been around.
He's going to get you to the 7th inning,
and he's got a presence about him. He's got that kind of aura, ace mentality, which is those guys could definitely learn from that.
Yeah, and again, to me, a guy who I think will get traded if they make the decision to unload is Hader. Hader, he's got the electric stuff. He's done it in the playoffs before. I know he's not having a great year, but I think if you put him in a pennant race, I think a guy like him could be electric.
Yeah, and he's lefty, and he's been there before. I mean, he just did it last year when he got traded over from Milwaukee. So he the first time's kind of jarring. It is kind of a shock to the system. You want to impress your new team. This team just traded for me, and sometimes you try to do a little too much. So if he got traded again, which he probably will, I think the Padres should sell personally. They got a lot of pieces that are getting up there in age a little bit, and
a lot of payroll. They got a
lot of payroll. A lot of guys are going to be free agents. Like Blake Snell is going to be a free agent. Hader's going to be a free agent. And those guys, you put a Blake Snell on Baltimore, they're a serious contender now. Blake Snell's leading the league in ERA, striking out everybody right now. Yep. He's already pitched in the AL East. He's pitched in the World Series. You put him in Baltimore, they're scary.
Or a place like Texas who needs some
pitching help. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of interesting, subplots. And before we came on, I said I'm kind of surprised that stuff hasn't been rolling yet. But now with the third wild card, teams just think they're in it forever. But if you're a 500 team right now, you're not going to win the World Series. But I mean, you look at the last 2 years, the Braves and the Astros, Phillies. and the Phillies made it there last year. With 84 wins. So you never know. So it puts these GMs in a tough spot. Like, do I pull the plug too early and not give my guys an extra 7 days to play it out, or do I go for it and try to inject some life? It's kind of at a standstill right now.
If you're the Dodgers, maybe even the Yankees, maybe even a Baltimore, do you take a run at a guy like Verlander or Scherzer? They're making a ton of money, and they got a ton of money they owe next year, but they've got the championship medal, and they're the bulldog #1 kind of guy that one of these younger teams probably needs.
I think the Dodgers would be more inclined to do it than the Yankees, just because their pitching staff's been decimated. That would make a little more sense. The Yankees, I feel like they're not going to say it. It's kind of a rebuilding year. Right. In pinstripes, Rodon missed half the year already. He just came back. They're I don't know. They're making some interesting decisions in New York. Just the way their team's constructed and what they've been, doing. A
lot of people think Cashman and Boone are playing for their job.
They are. They probably are. And it's Yankee fans are unique, and they're used to winning, and they're on some kind of. The last time they won the World Series was 2009. So there's definitely pressure there, but they don't have their guy. I mean, what do you want Boone and Cashman to do? They don't have their guy. And yes, they should have more depth than that, but you can't replace that. I mean, the way he changes the lineup and the way the pitcher it changes the pitching, attacking him, missing Judge is a huge piece to that puzzle. Now they're just beat up. Higashi Oka's out now, and like it kind of has that feel as like a rebuilding year. I don't think they're going to go out and make that, sell the farm move to get 2 months out of Verlander just to get a wild card. I just don't see that happening. Dodgers, are they going to win the World Series? Probably not, but the division's still in there. And when you get to the playoffs, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Will Smith, they can carry you. So Max Muncy hits bombs here and there. They can get hot. So it makes more to me. It makes more sense for the Dodgers to trade and pick up that kind of payroll for the 2-month rental plus the next year.
What's the most important thing when these teams are going down the stretch these next 2 months? Is it managing the bullpen? Is it just balls to the walls? You pitch whenever you got to pitch, or what's the important thing here this next month or so to get ready for September?
Scoring runs. Scoring runs makes everything easier. It depends where you are. If you're a young team like Baltimore, you just want to keep it going, right? You got the mojo. You want to stay healthy. You don't want any big injuries. You just want to keep, having that chemistry being built. If you're a veteran team like the Padres, they're still in it. They're still in the wild card hunt. You're telling yourselves, all right, we all have a track record. Let's just, we still have time. Let's look at the Braves 2 years ago. Let's look at the Phillies last year. Phillies are getting hot right now too. Let's look at the Phillies. Like, we can do it. Let's go. It's a little different feeling. It's more of kind of like it's put up or shut up time. Whereas if you're the younger team, you're just enjoying that being in a competitive game in August and September. The Orioles, they haven't been there in a while, so it's new for all these guys. The Rays, it sucks. Yeah,
go for it, Stu. One time, go for it, brother. You'll have a new stadium by Christmas.
They definitely. The Rays have been there, right? They've been in the playoffs. It seems like 5-6 years in a row now. So Cash, they're not panicking. Yeah, it sucks. You lost your lead, right? You're up 6.5 games coming into July. Now you're down 2.5. It sucks. But if you would have said, going into August that we're 2.5 games from winning our division, I think everybody on the team would say, let's take it. I'll take that right now. They have to just start playing better. It's easier said than done, obviously. They just need to get back to not trying to be the guy. Just get on base, pass the baton kind of a thing. Their pitching's fine. They got good pitching. Bullpen's coming around. They got Fairbanks has been back for a while. But they're a type of team that could use. I know a couple years ago they traded for Nelson Cruz. It didn't really go our way. He did all right, but it didn't put us over the top. Ohtani obviously is the cherry on top, but he would change the whole narrative of the league, really. Going
even
there.
A guy like Soto in Tampa Bay, you could flip him at the end of the year if you had to in the offseason. He has a year and a half left. You could probably absorb that contract for 2 months and then trade him in the offseason.
That makes sense. The way the Rays work, I feel like they're going to make a trade that you don't think makes sense now. And then, like, looking back next year, you're like, geez, we didn't win the World Series, but we got 2 more starters. They just, like Jose Siri, they stole him last year from the Astros, and now he leads the team in home runs. I don't know what they do over there, but they crunch the numbers the right way. They may even trade back for Snell. He's familiar with the team. I know they had a little bad blood when he left because they got pulled in the World Series or whatever.
Right.
But
that was my thought. Can you bring him back after what happened?
They know him really well. They drafted him out of high school. They know his makeup, and it's a profession. I would say no, just because
I'm with you.
There's some bad blood there, but the Rays are definitely in need of a move. I think their pitching's fine. Not fine, but I don't think it's going to be on the pitching end. I think it's going to be a hitter. I don't know who. Bellinger really doesn't fit. We don't really need that kind of a right. We have enough of a match. We need power guy. I feel like a lefty masher guy. Even somebody kind of like a Muncy. I know that he's not on the trade block, but somebody like him that has a lot of pop, like kind of like Brandon Lau, but Brandon Lau doesn't have the pop right now. So just to even out the lineup, and then you guys to start performing. Wander's on a bad slump. Randy's in a bad slump. They lost the backup catcher is out now, Mejia. Right. So their depth is being tested, but the pitching staffs. You got Glass now, and you got McClanahan and Taj Bradley's not bad. Eflin's having a great year. Their pitching staff's fine. Defense is good. Base running, they're being aggressive, getting thrown out recently, but that's how it goes. In the beginning of the year, they were being safe. So they just need their guys to start being their guys,
Well, Chris Perez, appreciate the time, man. Great insight on all the ins and outs of being traded and all those kind of things. Give me one wild card. Give me a wild card team that's going to make a big move.
Oh man,
that we're not thinking about.
I feel like the Phillies are right there.
Do the Angels make a move if they keep Ohtani?
What would the move be? I know, right? I don't see anything that puts them marginally better. No, I don't think the Angels make a move. I think their move would be getting rid of Otani and maybe a couple other guys. But I'm going to say the Astros are going to surprise you. Okay. You know, nobody's talking about the Astros. They just beat Texas last night. I don't know what they're doing tonight. They're only a game or two behind in the West. They got 2 of their 3 starting pitchers on the DL with Garcia and Urquidy. I can see what if Verlander goes back to the Astros for a year or two. You know, Jim Crane's got money.
Right.
They won the World Series last year. You know, the fan base is they're hanging around. You know, Altuve's on the way back.
Tucker, the Tampa guy's killing it right now.
Tucker's keeping them in it. Jordan started taking swings yesterday.
Yeah.
Bregman's been there all year. So I would say the Astros are kind of the wild card, and the Blue Jays. Nobody's talking about the Blue Jays.
Right. They got some money up there too.
They got some money. They got a great offense. You know, Stroman goes back to Toronto, or they get a Verlander or something. Now they're you know, talked about differently. So yeah, I would say that the Blue Jays and the Astros are 2 good teams that nobody's really talking about. You know, I mean, the Astros won the World Series last year, and they're just kind of lurking. So those are my 2 teams. And Texas, you know, Texas, I don't know if they thought they'd be this good this year, but they are. So, you know, you can't let those opportunities. They've already started. They went for a roll this. So,
and Bochy ain't getting any younger. This ain't a 5-year plan with Bochy.
Exactly. So Texas could be active too. They're not in on Otani, so probably waiting to see the chips fall from there. Right. But somebody like a Soto goes over to Texas and they can lock him up for a long-term deal or something. Like, Texas is a wild card too.
All right, man. Appreciate the time, and we'll be in touch, bro. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's exciting. Thanks for having me.
You got it, man. We'll be back. Powers on Sports Podcast.